Chapter 318. Job Level, Savor Real Name, Wombing Master, None Attribute, Lawful Good Ability Points, Strength, A Uncertain Durability, A Uncertain Agility, A Uncertain Magic Power, A Uncertain Luck, A Uncertain Relic, A Uncertain Job Level Skills, Origin Energy EX. Born from the Origin, mastered the method of using the Origin Energy. Evil Nemesis EX. Savior Savor, is righteous. Once identified by the Savior, Wombing, as the evil party and their actions have affected the world, they will be attacked by the world's energy of the same level. The degree of the attack is enough to kill and cause fatal effects. Old Skills, Uncertain EX, has the ability to change one's job level and attributes at will. This is the convenience of being in the Origin. Miracle, has the ability to use relics that do not belong to the current job level. These relics are not assigned to the current job level. Relic, Divine Sword of Salvation Excalibur, Level, EX Type. Divine Sword of Salvation Distance. Maximum Catch. It has the same name as the Sword of the Lake, and it has the same appearance as the Sword of the Lake. It is the amalgamation of the Manchala Formation. It can be broken down into the Manchala Formation. There are countless god relics in it. The Divine Sword has the power to save the world. It can release the lightning of salvation and the light of salvation. 12 powers God's Killer Level, EX Type. Divine Sword of Salvation Distance. 1 Maximum Catch. 1 There were 12 incarnations of Dragon Seed, Giant, Warrior, Storm, Annihilation, Flood, Vitality, Dependence, Thunder God, Phoenix, Sun, and Magician. Each incarnation was comparable to a noble artifact. It was the upgraded version of the power obtained from killing the gods. Chapter 319. It's Winterwood City, and I was directly summoned by the Great Holy Grail. Wombing looked at the surroundings and said thoughtfully, "That's right, this man wearing a black leather jacket, black leather shoes, and a black top hat was Wombing." The reason why Wombing was dressed like this was because Wombing's current class was Assassin. Is my real name Jack the Ripper? Or is it an accident? Wombing felt his own power and said helplessly. After all, the class selection this time was automatically chosen by the Great Holy Grail. For Wombing, although it didn't mean that it didn't matter what class he was, Wombing wouldn't be troubled by the fact that he was an assassin. In Wombing's view, every class had its own benefits. Even the weakest assassin had its own benefits. Although my combat ability is weakened, it's still good to have my aura blocked. After all, I'm here to investigate, not to attack. With that, Wombing walked out of the Great Hollow of Winterwood City. Even if it was a parallel world, the structure of the Great Hollow of Yuanzhong Mountain was still the same. However, this world was quite strange. Isn't it a little too peaceful? Wombing stood on a high ground and looked at Winterwood City. At this moment, Winterwood City was peaceful. With Wombing's eyesight, although he was an assassin, he could still see the scenery of Winterwood City. At this moment, people were coming and going in Winterwood City. Shops were open as usual, people were rushing about as usual, and students were attending classes as usual. It was very peaceful. Wombing looked at the black dragon-shaped command seal on his hand and frowned. The seal is also useless, as if there's no black mud in this world. Then Wombing turned his head. If I have to say something, it's only because this Great Holy Grail contains a large amount of black mud. However, this black mud doesn't possess the power of Source. It's just pure evil. After Wombing arrived here, he asked Collis to examine the Great Holy Grail. Collis discovered that apart from the pure evil of this world, there was nothing else in the Great Holy Grail. My inspection is flawless. Please don't doubt me, Master. A voice came from the black top hat on Wombing's head. It was Collis' cold voice. Collis was able to change her appearance according to Wombing's class. After all, Collis was the one who changed her appearance into the golden-green dragon horn. I'm sorry, Collis. I'm not doubting you. Wombing apologized with a bitter smile. However, without the black mud, how did the black token bring me here? Wombing was distressed. Collis didn't say anything. She didn't know the truth. Forget it. Let's go check if there's anything special about this world's Winterwood City. After saying that, Wombing turned into a black shadow and disappeared. In a Chinese restaurant, Wu Ming sat in his seat, waiting for his order. Although Wu Ming was still wearing a black leather jacket, black leather shoes, and a black top hat, the other people in the restaurant only treated Wu Ming as a weirdo. It didn't affect them much. Soon Wu Ming's Chinese dishes were served. Wu Ming began to eat heartily. The reason why Wu Ming came back to eat in this restaurant was that he happened to see his own country's dishes in a foreign country. After all, Wu Ming was adopted by an old man in China. Before this, Wu Ming had explored the entire Winterwood City. However, Wu Ming didn't find anything wrong. Soon Wu Ming finished his meal. No matter how you look at it, it's strange. Wu Ming leaned on the chair and began to talk to himself. Wu Ming, of course, said that there was no special event or trace of the black mud. In any case, the mark on Wu Ming's hand wouldn't lie to Wu Ming, right? The black mud had no consciousness. At this time, a priest came to the restaurant. "Boss, a serving of mapo tofu." After saying that, the priest directly sat at the table closest to the door. "Master, that person has a sacred mark on his hand," Kala suddenly said. Wu Ming took a closer look. There was indeed a mark on the back of the priest's hand that looked like a blood clot. Only the qualified magicians chosen by the Great Holy Grail could possess such a thing. A master who didn't summon a servant would possess a stigmata. And when the master summoned a servant, the stigmata would become a command incantation. And the priest seemed to have noticed that someone was observing him. He turned his head to look at Wu Ming's direction. However, all he saw was a table full of Chinese dishes and a stack of Japanese yen. There was no one on the chair. Was it an illusion? The priest was puzzled. But when he saw the mapo tofu on the table, the priest no longer paid attention to that direction. Instead, he focused on the mapo tofu. On the street, Wu Ming pressed down on his black hat and said with some surprise, "I didn't expect that priest to be so vigilant." Wu Ming used his assassin's agility to leave the restaurant the moment the priest turned his head. By the way, those Japanese yen were taken by Wu Ming from some rich families. Of course, Wu Ming left some gold as an exchange. According to the information, now should be the time of the Holy Grail War. That person is likely to be one of the masters of this Holy Grail War. Kala said. Previously, when Wu Ming explored Winterwood City, he found out that the date was 1994. That was the time when the Fourth Holy Grail War began. In Ilya's world, the Holy Grail War was stopped and was never held again. However, it was different in this parallel world. If there were no accidents, the Holy Grail War should be held normally now. Kalas, I suddenly have a new idea. Suddenly Wu Ming smiled. Kalas did not say anything. She knew that her master's bad taste was about to start again. Wu Ming came to the big hole in the Yuzhong mountain. Wu Ming took out some materials from his black ripples and began to draw a magic circle. It was the same magic circle as when Wu Ming came to this world. That's right, Wu Ming decided to summon the heroic spirits to participate in the Holy Grail War. Anyway, he had the command seal black mark in his hand. The only uncertain part is the Holy Grail War. Maybe someone's wish caused the black mud to come, so we have to participate. Wu Ming earnestly said to Kalas. You're just interested, master. Kalas mercilessly ridiculed. How could that be? Isn't this a good opportunity to summon a servant and also summon Gil from Ilya's world? Wu Ming smiled. Okay, let's begin. After saying that, Wu Ming took out a clay plate from the black ripples beside him. This was something that Wu Ming had exchanged with Zelik. Wu Ming let young Gil drop the first blood to facilitate the summoning. Fill it up, fill it up, fill it up, fill it up. Cycle after cycle, then 5. However, when it's full, it's time to abandon it. Declare, thou shalt listen to my command, and my life is with thy sword. Answer the call of the Holy Grail. If you are willing to follow this will and this principle, then respond. I hereby swear that I am willing to accomplish all good deeds in the world, and I am willing to exterminate all evil deeds in the world. Thou shalt be the 7 days of the 3 spirits of words, from the wheel of inhibition, the guardian of the Libra. Following Wu Ming's spiritual words, the magic circle glowed, and a violent hurricane swept everything around it. In an instant, the clay plate in Wu Ming's hand glowed. In an instant, a figure appeared in the center of the magic circle. Long time no see, Hyunryong, said the figure. Wuming was dumbfounded. Chapter 320. Wuming was dumbfounded, but he did summon Gilgamesh. Looking at the figure that didn't look like a young Gil walking out of the dust, Wuming was silent. Although this Gilgamesh was an adult version, and although he couldn't rule out the possibility that young Gil had used a class card to fuse with himself and return to his adult form, but the Gilgamesh standing in front of Wuming was a woman, and there was no doubt that this Gilgamesh was the Gilgamesh that Wuming met. There was no doubt about it. At this moment, the female Gilgamesh was somewhat similar to when Angelica used the Gilgamesh class card. Her lower body was covered in golden armor, and a red cloak fluttered from her waist. Her upper body was still naked, and the red lines were stuck to the queen's sparkling waist. Her upper body was only covered by a black unlined shirt that could only cover her breasts. Her neck and wrists were adorned with golden accessories, and only one side had shoulder armor and gauntlets. Her ears were adorned with large golden earrings, and her hair was spread out. Her delicate and beautiful face, coupled with her arrogant red eyes looking at Wuming, slowly gave off the aura of a queen. How boring, Hyunryong. Have you fallen to the point of being an assassin? The female Gilgamesh, or rather the female version, mocked Wuming. Well, although I've thought about summoning other Gilgamesh, at least I still have a trace of young Gilgamesh's blood. Why? Wuming rubbed his forehead with one hand, and said rather helplessly. Just another young version of this king, and you want to compete with this king? Ridiculous. This king has already sent you back to the constellation of heroes, Queen Gil said domineeringly. Forget it. Wuming gave up struggling. After a while, Wuming learned that when Wuming summoned the servant, young Gil did receive the message, and was excited to come to this world. However, Wuming got one thing wrong, and that was Queen Sparkle. Although the clay tablet contained young Gil's blood, and was suitable for summoning young Gil, the Wuming itself was a very good artifact for the Queen of Summoning, Glint. Even if you came to a parallel world, changed your class and added a curse, your nature will not change. This king has already made up his mind. This king won't come out even if you don't act as a holy relic to summon him. However, if it's you, no one can win against this king. The queen responded to Wuming domineeringly. No. As expected of my direct disciple. Ahaha. Wuming laughed awkwardly. However, compared to Queen Sparkle or the adult version of Gilgamesh, the young Gil or the old version, the returned king, of Gilgamesh was easier to get along with. The adult version of Gilgamesh's personality was a bit bad. A minute of silence for the poor Gil. Since I've already summoned you, that's it. I originally wanted to summon Gil who possessed a class card, but now it seems that you and I have formed a contract. Feeling that his magic was connected to Queen Sparkle and was supplying her, Wuming felt helpless. Fortunately, my assassin class isn't considered orthodox. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to pay for your magic consumption. As the top heroic spirit existence, Gilgamesh's consumption was naturally huge. If an assassin were to supply Queen Sparkle with magic, wouldn't it be draining her magic and sending her back to the heroic spirit palace? It's your honor to be able to let this king come, Hyunryong. Even if you are this king's teacher, you should be proud. Queen Sparkle said proudly. Her small face was shining with unusual happiness. Didn't you say that you snatched it? Of course, Wuming didn't say this sentence. After all, he knew his own disciple. If he said that, Queen Sparkle would be angry again. Gil, you should understand the current situation. Wuming cleaned up the traces on the scene. After all, summoning a servant here couldn't be seen by others. In any case, he had to respect the rules of the Holy Grail War. Even if it's you, you should call this king king. But seeing that you are this king's teacher's clone, this king allows you to call this king by his name. Queen Sparkle's face was arrogant. She looked at Wuming with a "you can be proud" look. That's why it's hard to get along with Jill when she's at her peak. Wuming sighed helplessly. This king has learned the specific situation from another young version of this king. It's about some black mud. With this king here, Hyunryong, you just have to lie down obediently. Wuming didn't say anything about the arrogant Queen Sparkle. Anyway, he had already gotten used to it. It was just that he couldn't get used to it for a while. Now that the black mud hasn't appeared, I suspect that someone used the Great Holy Grail, so I decided to participate in this Holy Grail war. This is also the reason why I summoned you. After all, in order to become a master, one must summon a servant. Therefore, Wu Ming chose to summon young Gil, and used the black dragon-shaped mark on his hand as a command spell. If he encountered the other 7 servants and masters, he could just say that he was an extra cheater. As a result, Wu Ming really became a master and occupied a spot. In fact, Wu Ming was worried about whether he would also occupy a spot. After all, he was summoned using the Great Holy Grail ritual. With the Holy Grail's nature, who knows if there would be any accidents? I always feel that if there is an accident, it must be caused by the master. Kalas complained. It shouldn't be. Wu Ming was a little uncertain. He didn't find any abnormalities when he came to this world. And the magicians were also very stable. Strictly speaking, he was the abnormal one. Well, since you're already involved, then let's go through with it. Wu Ming smiled, but this smile was particularly gloomy. Kalas, I haven't seen you for a long time. At this time, Queen Blink heard Kalas's voice and greeted Wu Ming's top hat. I'm deeply honored, Hero King. Kalas said very politely. After all, Kalas was not Wu Ming. Towards a great king, Kalas was still very respectful. Well, now I have to find a place to stay, so it's convenient for the next action. Wu Ming said and began to walk toward the big hole. Then you do well, Qianriyang. This king will be here waiting for your good news. Queen Blink said, turned into golden particles and disappeared. This was the spiritual form of a servant. Not only Gilgamesh could do it, but also Wu Ming could do it. After all, Wu Ming was now in the state of a servant transformed by the Great Holy Grail. Then you stay here first. I'll go to Winterwood City to buy a house. Wu Ming waved his hand. As Wu Ming moved toward the downtown of Winterwood City, Kalas' voice came from Wu Ming's head. I always feel that the future is worrying. Chapter 321. At night, Wu Ming brought Gilgamesh to a house. Located in the center of the bustling Winterwood City, it was a nice small villa with a courtyard. This was a place where residents were going abroad. Because they were in a hurry to go abroad, they didn't pack anything. The owner of the house left in a hurry with his suitcase. With Gilgamesh's temper, Wu Ming would definitely say, how can a place where civilians live bear the arrival of this king? Therefore, Wu Ming quickly found someone to decorate it during the day, and bought some high-end furniture. This time, he went to the Yuanzong mountain cave to pick up Gilgamesh. You made this king wait for so long. Do you know your crime, Qianriyang? Gilgamesh stared at Wu Ming unhappily. Well, when you get home, be obedient or I'll starve you. Wu Ming warned Gilgamesh. Humph. You really dare to say that, Qianriyang? Why aren't you hurrying to cook for this prince? Don't make this king wait for too long. With that, Gilgamesh swung his beautiful long hair, left Wu Ming, and walked straight into the small villa. Wu Ming shrugged helplessly, then walked in and began to cook with the ingredients he bought before. At the table, Gilgamesh gracefully tasted red wine, and enjoyed the sumptuous dishes prepared by Wu Ming. Qianriyang, the food you make is delicious. Gilgamesh took another sip of red wine and praised. It's good that you are satisfied. By the way, Gil, do you have any wish to make for the Holy Grail? It's just the Holy Grail. It's mine to begin with. I only joined the Holy Grail war to take back what belongs to me. Gilgamesh responded to Wu Ming's words domineeringly. Yes, Gil is the best, Wu Ming said perfunctorily. What do you mean by that? Are you patronizing this king? Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming with dissatisfaction. Then what about you, Qianriyang? If it weren't for the black mud, would you have chosen to participate in the Holy Grail war? If it's me, I probably won't, Wu Ming said after thinking for a while. After all, I already have a Holy Grail. Moreover, the Holy Grail that I want to fulfill will not be able to fulfill my wish. Wu Ming smiled indifferently. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Gilgamesh scoffed at the Holy Grail's wish. That's true. That Holy Grail is said to be an omnipotent wishing machine, but in reality, it's not omnipotent at all. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it's a fake. Wu Ming did not comment on Gilgamesh's mockery of the Holy Grail. Instead, he talked about another matter. By the way, I will go out and investigate the other trainee masters and servants later. I may come back very late. You should sleep first. Wu Ming put down the tableware and wiped the corner of his mouth. Got it. Remember not to lose anything. Even if you are already so inferior, you are still this king's teacher. This king doesn't want to lose his master the next day. Gilgamesh put down the wine glass and said indifferently. But Wu Ming, who understood Gilgamesh, naturally knew that Gilgamesh was concerned about him. As expected of Gilgamesh, his tsundere nature is very obvious. Wu Ming squinted his eyes and smiled at Gilgamesh. Are you kidding me? This king is the most ancient king, the hero king Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh's face instantly turned red. It was unknown whether it was because of anger or because he was pampered. Yes, I know. Remember to put the plate in the sink. I will come back later to wash it. But if you can help me wash it, then I will thank the heavens. Wu Ming said with a smile. Then he stood up and walked toward the door. Tisk, you actually let this king do such a thing? What kind of joke is this? Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming's back as he sat on the chair angrily. My purpose for participating in the Holy Grail War. Isn't it to see you guys? At this moment, the king's face revealed his human side. Now the king was living more realistically than anyone else. There was basically no one on the streets at night. Only a few street lamps illuminated the darkness on the empty streets. A stray cat was lying on the chair resting. Suddenly, a black shadow flashed under the street lamp. The stray cat was so scared that it jumped and ran away. Wu Ming stood on the street lamp and looked at the city. Wu Ming thought about Gilgamesh. Since he could make Gilgamesh swear that he would not answer unless he summoned, and even snatched the summoning quota from young Gil this time. In addition, Wu Ming saw the emotions in Gilgamesh's eyes. Wu Ming smiled helplessly. Looks like Gil's dependence on me has become an obsession. No matter what, this Gilgamesh was just a little girl. Compared to the male version of Gilgamesh, Queen Sparkle still had the gentleness of a woman. Wu Ming left with Enkidu after Enkidu's death. At that time, Gilgamesh was still grieving over the death of his good friend. In addition, his master had also left. This was a little cruel for Gil. No wonder the history books recorded that Gilgamesh abandoned the Uruk after his good friend's death and began his journey to find the grass of immortality. This was a huge blow to Gil. You're just like Artoria, Gil. Wu Ming smiled and did not say anything. After all, she was a king. She was not as weak as Wu Ming thought. Wu Ming's figure flashed. As an afterimage appeared, Wu Ming disappeared from the street lamp and began his investigation. The first place to investigate was the overseer of the Holy Grail War, the Holy Church. Wu Ming did not choose to hide his identity as a servant, and directly walked into the Holy Church's Winterwood City branch. As soon as he entered the church, he saw a priest praying to the cross. Of course, this priest was not the Mapo priest that Wu Ming met before, but a priest who looked old. The priest who was praying heard someone coming in, and turned his head. It was a rather old but energetic man. From the marks on his palm, it could be seen that he was a martial artist. According to the results of Wu Ming's investigation, this quite capable old man was called Yan Fengli. You are a servant. Yan Fengli saw Wu Ming. At first he was surprised, but then he calmed down. Is it your master who wants to ask the overseer to answer his doubts? Yan Fengli said calmly. The master had doubts and sent a servant to the overseer of the Holy Church to answer his doubts. This kind of example was not unheard of. Yes, my master wants to know how many servants have gathered in this city, and whether we can start the war. Wu Ming pretended to be very indifferent and said, So that's the case, can't wait to start the war? Yan Fengli was relieved. There are 4 servants gathered in this city, Lancer, Rider, Caster, and Berserker. Including you, there are already 5 servants. Yan Fengli said, Thank you. After that, Wu Ming turned into a shadow and disappeared. However, Yan Fengli's face was filled with confusion. The memory just now, I can't remember it at all. Is it the servant's noble phantasm or skill? Yan Fengli was seriously thinking about this strange phenomenon. Chapter 322. Fengli's ability was not bad. He was worthy of being a supervisor twice. Wu Ming used Jack the Ripper's skill, Intelligence Erase, to erase all the information about Wu Ming in Fengli's mind. Intelligence Erase B. At the end of the battle, including encounter, the memory of witnesses and opponents, recorded information about Jack's ability, real name, and appearance will disappear. But it can't fool scientific products such as cameras. Wu Ming didn't find anything like a camera inside the Holy Church, so Wu Ming didn't choose to use mist to cover his appearance. Instead, he chose to use Intelligence Erase. Wu Ming left the Holy Church and came to the street. Lancer, Rider, Caster, Berserker, and me Assassin. Does this mean that the other party didn't notice me and Gilgamesh's archer? Wu Ming stood in the shadow and analyzed what Fengli said. In addition to the 6 of us, there is still Saber with the best attributes. I don't know if she hasn't come yet or if she's hiding. Wu Ming thought for a moment and didn't think about it anymore. Well, in that case, let's leave it at that. For the time being, I can't figure out the reason for this world's abnormality. After a while, Wu Ming returned to the small villa. The house was dark, and the light was not turned on. Bam! Wu Ming turned on the light, and then Queen's voice came. Too slow. Golden particles began to gather on the sofa, and Gilgamesh's figure appeared. You haven't slept yet, Gil. Wu Ming sat next to Gilgamesh and said with a little surprise. What's there to be surprised about? As a servant, this king doesn't need to sleep. But this king has been waiting for you to come back. Can't you even say a word of thanks? Gilgamesh said proudly. Indeed, Gilgamesh was right. A servant only needed to enter spiritual form to replace sleep, and as long as there was enough mana or food, the servant could always be active. So, my queen, have you put the tableware on the table in the sink? Wu Ming cast a smile at Gilgamesh. Humph. This king has already taken care of such a trivial matter. Gilgamesh crossed his arms in front of his chest and said rather disdainfully. Then go to sleep. No matter what, girls should go to bed early. Wu Ming patted Gilgamesh's head as if he was treating a child. And Wu Ming was ready to accept Gilgamesh's anger, but Gilgamesh didn't get angry. Wu Ming removed his hand from Gilgamesh's head and looked at Gilgamesh, who didn't do anything. Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming and turned into golden particles and disappeared. This is a reward for you. Don't be too proud, Henryang. Gilgamesh's voice came from the air and then disappeared. Really, there should be a limit to arrogance. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly and then walked into the kitchen. When Wu Ming wanted to wash the dishes, he found that there was no tableware in the sink, but it was clean. Next to the sink, a few plates and bowls were neatly stacked together. It looked like someone had already washed them. Although the kitchen sink was in a mess, it was obvious that it was done by someone who didn't wash dishes for a long time. Really? Wu Ming laughed. He didn't expect Queen Flash to take his joke seriously. Wu Ming really didn't expect Gil to wash the dishes. However, Wu Ming bet that the male version of Adult Flash wouldn't do that. Only his Queen Flash would be arrogant. Since I have nothing to do, I might as well go investigate the enemy. After that, Wu Ming left the small mansion. Gilgamesh revealed himself and looked at the direction Wu Ming left. He muttered and then entered the spirit state. Boring. The next morning, Wu Ming returned to the small mansion. Gilgamesh came into contact with the spirit state and revealed himself. Did you go to investigate for information, Henryang? Gilgamesh returned to her good queen posture and said domineeringly. Yes, information is very important. Wu Ming nodded and went to the sofa to sit down. Humph. You already have this king. What are you still investigating for? If this king wanted, he could have ended the Holy Grail War last night. Gilgamesh also came to his exclusive seat and sat down. It was a rather tasteful and luxurious seat. It was also left behind by the owner of this house. Because he left in a hurry, Wu Ming directly spent money to buy some of the more valuable things. At first, the owner of this house didn't want to buy it. After all, it was also an antique. However, because he was in a hurry and left in a hurry, this seat was successfully traded by Wu Ming at a price that satisfied both parties. Then it was occupied by Gilgamesh. Although Wu Ming bought it for Gil, sitting on her luxurious seat, Queen Twinkle crossed her legs and supported her chin with one hand, silently looking at Wu Ming. After all, there is an old saying that goes, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Wu Ming poured a glass of wine for Gilgamesh, and handed it to Her Majesty Queen, who was crossing her legs. So, what information did you find out, Hyenryong? Gilgamesh took the transparent goblet and took a sip. Then, she looked at Wu Ming as if her anger had subsided. You also know that the Holy Grail War was started by the so-called three families. While talking, Wu Ming also poured himself a glass of wine. The three families are composed of the Inosaka family, the Mesotome family, and the House of Einstein Barons. Last night, I explored the local residences of these three families and found two servants. One is a male servant suspected of being a king in the Inosaka family, and the other is a female servant with snake breath in the Mesotome family. After taking a sip of wine, Wu Ming continued. There is no one in the castle of the House of Einstein Barons in Winterwood City. They should have not yet arrived in Winterwood City. Plus, there is a supervisor of the Holy Church. It is inferred that the servant of the House of Einstein Barons should be a saber swordsman. The servants of the Mesotome family and the Inosaka family are not caster or berserker. As for why, I will tell you later. In short, these two should be lancer and rider. Wu Ming put down the glass, and then took out a map from nowhere. And here I found traces of berserker. Wu Ming pointed to the place on the edge of Winterwood City, and that place was the Amiya Mansion. Wu Ming went to the Amiya Mansion with the idea of seeing Shiro Amiya in this world. As a result, he accidentally found multiple magic barriers and traces of berserker. There is no way, a big guy who seems to have no sense of reason can't hide. There is no need to guess. And this is the berserker that Wu Ming knows, Hercules. When Wu Ming found berserker, he was waiting in the courtyard of the Amiya Mansion. Although Wu Ming did not find the master, Wu Ming could almost guess. Magician killer, Amiya Kiritsugu. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. And then did you fight with berserker? Gilgamesh shook the glass and asked with interest. Of course not, I just accidentally found the trace of berserker, and then quickly retreated, but the other side should have found me. Wu Ming remembered the guy who wanted to become a partner of justice, and could not help but frown. A partner of justice is as cunning as a fox. Although she did not like her fiancé very much, she did not hate him. It was okay to be worried. Don't worry, Sora. Let's not talk about my moon marrow elixir. He is a famous servant. The man named Kenneth said proudly as if he was praising himself. Well, that's good. The woman named Sora nodded. Then, let me see the glory of Ku Churin. Kenneth looked at the place where the blue-haired man disappeared and said carefully. On the other side, Wu Ming, who had arrived at Tuki Hotel, suddenly felt that something was wrong. Is there an idle person dispersing technique around? It seems that I've been discovered. Although he was discovered, Wu Ming did not panic. As a qualified assassin, Jack the Ripper was undoubtedly qualified. Not only was his aura concealment level A+, but he also had support skills and noble phantoms, such as intelligence concealment, Fog Knight's murder, dark fog, and so on. For an assassin, it was simply a success. This was also why Jack the Ripper, even if he was an assassin, could cause great headaches to both the red and black sides. It seems that this caster is quite a powerful character to be able to detect me without me noticing. Wu Ming stood in front of the Winterwood Hotel, and did not hide. He just waited for the arrival of the other party. Then you guessed wrong. It's just a little trick, Senior. Suddenly, a familiar and frivolous voice was heard. This voice. Is it Cuculin? Wu Ming felt a little helpless. Could it be that this was a battle between different classes to mock the battle between Serence and Cuculin? Sure enough, Senior, it's really you. With the appearance of the blue particles, Cuculin's figure appeared in front of Wu Ming. It's really God's will, Cuculin. Wu Ming looked at Cuculin indifferently. Although in Wu Ming's memory, Cuculin was a freak in blue tights, but in front of him, Cuculin was a mage in a robe and holding a wooden scepter. You've changed a lot. Wu Ming joked. I have the adaptability of a caster magician, but I didn't expect you to become an assassin. Did something happen to you after you left Connaught? Cuculin asked in a comfortable tone. as if he was chatting with a good friend whom he hadn't seen for many years. I did experience a lot. Speaking of which, were you killed by Maeve's plot? Wuming was concerned about Cuchulain's death. In Wuming's history, Cuchulain was summoned by Maeve. Cuchulain was also a disciple of Skaha, and fought with his fellow apprentice, Ferdia. In the end, Cuchulain won a Pyrrhic victory. Then he was plotted against by a bard invited by Maeve and was killed by his own gun. Ah yes, I was plotted against by Maeve. In the end I was killed by my own gun. How ironic. Although Cuchulain said so, he did not show much anger. Instead, he calmly accepted his own death. Senior, you shouldn't be dead. I heard some rumors about you from my teacher. What Cuchulain meant was that Wuming, as the powerful body of the Dragon of Origin, should not die. I'm not dead, but this time, I participated in the Holy Grail War because I have some things to investigate. Wuming nodded. Oh, so that means it's fine even if I don't obtain the Holy Grail? What a coincidence. I don't need the Holy Grail, but my master does. Although he's quite annoying, he's still my master. I'll help him out a little. Then Cuchulain flashed his staff. Come and fight with me, Sierra. Chapter 324. Wuming finally knew why Cuchulain joined the Holy Grail War. This guy simply wanted to fight against the heroes of history. Looking at Cuchulain, who was rushing over with his staff raised, Wuming helplessly picked up his weapon as an assassin, 2 unusually gorgeous daggers. Wuming didn't complain about why these 2 daggers were so beautiful. Why would an assassin care about whether the weapon was beautiful or not? Ahem, at least it was easy to use. Wuming swung his daggers and met Cuchulain, who was attacking with his staff. Wuming and Cuchulain were really 2 weirdos. Originally, they both used guns, but one turned into a wooden stick and the other into a dagger. Needless to say, the wooden stick was considered a long weapon and could be used as a spear. However, Wuming had never used a dagger or similar weapon before. However, bang bang bang, the dagger and the staff collided with each other, making a sound of steel colliding. Wuming and Cuchulain's figures were constantly changing, waving their arms at a speed invisible to ordinary people, constantly attacking each other. Wuming usually used a sword or a gun. Although Wuming had never used a dagger, don't forget that Wuming's teacher was the queen of the demon realm, the god-slayer who had trained countless heroes, Skaha. Daggers and other short weapons were naturally on Skaha's schedule to train Wuming. Moreover, Wuming was gradually suppressing Cuchulain. With a feint, Cuchulain escaped from Wuming's entanglement. I can only say that you are indeed my senior. Even after becoming an assassin, your attributes are still not low. Cuchulain smiled helplessly. You, on the other hand, have your attributes dropped so much because you became a caster? Wuming held his daggers with both hands, and stood not far away from Cuchulain. Through the fight, Silent Wonder could clearly sense that Cuchulain's strength and durability were quite low, at least much lower than Silent Wonder's current attributes. He estimated that Cuchulain's strength and durability were either D or E, while Silent Wonder, as Assassin Jack the Ripper, had strength and durability of C level. Only dexterity can compete with me. And this is because you used the Lune Rune to strengthen yourself. Yes, as the first magic that Wuming learned, the Lune magic, was naturally very familiar with it. Although Wuming didn't use it much, it didn't mean that Wuming wasn't familiar with the Lune magic. As a mere caster, it was impossible for his dexterity attribute to be high enough to reach a level. In addition, Wuming was familiar with the Lune Rune, so he naturally inferred that Cuchulain used the Lune Rune. Ah yes, you are indeed my senior. I did use the Lune Rune to strengthen my attributes, but it can only strengthen strength, durability, and dexterity to a level. If I want to fight with you, I can't do it without dexterity. Maybe I will be out of the game in the next second. Cuchulain touched his head, not annoyed that Wuming had exposed his secret. Obviously, you were summoned as a caster. Not only did you not ambush in your workshop, but you also wanted to fight me in close combat. I'm really convinced by your muscle head. Wuming said rather helplessly. Well, since my senior said so, then I will fight with you as a caster. Cuchulain waved his hand in the direction of Wuming, and a light appeared under Wuming's feet. A rather simple and unadorned rune came into sight. This was the Loon rune that Cuchulainn had set up during the close combat with Wuming, and now it was activated. You know I'm your senior. How could I not notice such an obvious trap? Wuming said as he accelerated and jumped away from the light. The moment Wuming left, a violent explosion occurred at the position of the rune. The flames of the explosion spread to Wuming, who had not completely escaped from the explosion range. The flames raged in the atmosphere, absorbing oxygen and burning fiercely. Wu Ming, on the other hand, disappeared into the flames. Of course, this little trick naturally couldn't kill Wu Ming, and Cuchulainn doubted whether it could cause any harm to Wu Ming. After all, I also appeared as an assassin. This is the beginning of the Holy Grail War. See you next time, Cuchulainn. Wu Ming's voice came out from the atmosphere, and then disappeared. Under the cover of the flame explosion, Wu Ming's A+ level aura made Cuchulainn lose sight of Wu Ming. Well, that's it. With that, Cuchulainn turned into blue particles and entered the state of spiritualization. That's it, I simply fought a few times with the caster and then retreated. Wu Ming put down his glass and leaned on the sofa. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, looked at Wu Ming with interest. I didn't expect the caster to be your junior. Then again, this junior is related to your identity in other myths. I haven't heard that the Uruk Hyenryong has a junior. Because of interest, Gilgamesh began to shake his legs. Looking at Gilgamesh's shaking legs, Wu Ming said that he couldn't see anything from the armor, so he simply stopped looking. After all, I'm also a traveler. It's not surprising that I know people in other areas. Wu Ming said casually. So, do you have a plan? Gilgamesh asked. Gilgamesh didn't believe that Hyenryong, who had investigated almost all the enemies, didn't have a plan. The Uruk Hyenryong's reputation was not only obtained by protecting the people. As the closest person to Hyenryong, Gilgamesh naturally knew that Hyenryong had a very high strategy. Moreover, this time Wu Ming appeared in the world as an assassin. Wu Ming, who didn't have the ability to break through, would definitely choose to use wisdom. However, this time Gilgamesh guessed wrong. I didn't prepare a plan, I just simply investigated the enemy. Wu Ming waved his hand tiredly. After all, you said that if you wanted to, you could end the Holy Grail War in one night. The key is that there's no need at all. Wu Ming smiled indifferently as he leaned on the sofa. After Wu Ming finished speaking, Gilgamesh frowned. What do you mean? Gilgamesh asked. Do you still remember why I came to this world? Wu Ming hinted. Gilgamesh suddenly realized. After all, Gilgamesh came to this world in the form of occupying a spot in the Holy Grail War. It was inevitable that he would pay a little attention to the Holy Grail War. I almost forgot. You came to this world because of that strange black mud. Yes, Wu Ming's original purpose was the black mud with origin power, and he participated in the Holy Grail War only because Wu Ming hadn't discovered the black mud for the time being. Therefore, he suspected that there was something fishy about the Holy Grail War, so he participated. In other words, I just have to wait quietly, wait for the final victor, and then investigate the truth about the black mud. Chapter 325. Of course, although Wu Ming said that he would wait quietly, Wu Ming wasn't someone who could just sit around and do nothing, and neither was Gilgamesh. Therefore, Wu Ming brought Gilgamesh to the amusement park. Well, amusement park, important things must be said twice. Gilgamesh looked like he was holding back his anger, looked at the amusement park in front of him, then looked at the smiling Wu Ming and said, You actually let this king come to a place for children. You really have guts. Do you think this king is a child, Hyenryong? However, Wu Ming just waved his hand. What does it matter? After all, I watched you grow up, and I can be considered your adoptive father. What's wrong with a father bringing his daughter to the amusement park? Wu Ming said seriously. Of course, it would be perfect if Gilgamesh didn't stop him from opening the gate of Babylon. Wu Ming held down Gilgamesh, who was about to open the gate of Babylon, and smiled. Ma Gilgamesh, just treat this as playing with me. You can also experience the feelings of the people while you're at it. Besides, you've never been to an amusement park before, right? Wu Ming calmly advised, not at all worried that Gilgamesh would pull out his sword and stab him. Humph. Seeing that you are my teacher, this king will accompany you. Gilgamesh shook off Wu Ming's hand that was pressing down on her arm. With a "I'm being merciful, come and thank me" look on her face. Yes, yes. Thank you for taking the time to accompany me to experience the people's feelings. In Wu Ming's view, Gilgamesh wasn't angry at all. The gate of Babylon only needed Gilgamesh's consciousness to open. Raising his hand was just a habitual action. In other words, even if Wu Ming was holding Gilgamesh's hand, Gilgamesh could still open the gate of Babylon if he wanted to. This showed that Gilgamesh wasn't angry. Then please change your clothes. After all, your current appearance is not suitable for experiencing the people's feelings. Wu Ming pointed to the people around him. They looked at Gilgamesh as if they were looking at a girl who liked to cosplay. In order to avoid trouble, Wu Ming had already changed his clothes into ordinary casual clothes. He was wearing a white shirt, a black jacket, black pants, and a pair of casual shoes. He wore a cap on his black hair, and his red eyes were emitting a captivating light. This light was deep and distant, and it was quite attractive. He looked quite handsome. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, was still wearing his golden armor, exposing his abdomen. Although it was reasonable to dress like Gilgamesh at the entrance of the amusement park, everyone's attention was still on Gilgamesh's supreme appearance. As a person with 2/3 divinity and 1/3 humanity, Gilgamesh was naturally blessed by the gods. His IQ, appearance, and so on were not comparable to ordinary people at all. Thinking about young Jill, he had a skill called Beautiful Boy in his attribute. Beautiful Boy. CIT was a display of the skill of a beautiful young man that made people want to protect him. Although it had a magic effect that could charm people regardless of gender, it could be avoided by magic skills. Even if there was no magic resistance, the effect could be mitigated if there was resistance. Although Beautiful Boy's skill was only C rank, having this skill meant that his appearance was heaven-defying. And the effect could be said to be even more effective on Shiny Girl. At this moment, it was not an exaggeration to say that Gilgamesh was a peerless beauty. These mongrel cultivators, bastards. How dare they look straight at this king? Gilgamesh seemed to be really angry. Forget it, after all, it's just to experience the people's feelings. It's not like they will lose a piece of meat. By the way, it's better to quickly change your outfit so that you can avoid trouble. Wu Ming comforted Gilgamesh. After all, if Gilgamesh felt humiliated and took out his sword, then they would be finished directly. That's true. I'll do as you say today. Gilgamesh's body began to emit light. Gilgamesh wanted to change his outfit here. After Wu Ming saw it, he directly pulled Gilgamesh and ran away. When the passers-by saw the blonde beauty's boyfriend pulling the beauty away, they only felt a little regretful that there was no beauty to see. Then they began to busy themselves with their own things. A moment later, Gilgamesh and Wu Ming returned to the entrance of the amusement park. Why does this king have to hide and change his outfit? This king is the hero king, Gilgamesh. If he wants to hide, it should be these bastards. Gilgamesh said unhappily. After all, Wu Ming suddenly pulled Gilgamesh's hand. Wu Ming was still wondering why Gilgamesh did not get angry, but now it seemed that his anger was delayed. Well, don't forget the hidden rules of the Holy Grail War. Just put up with it. Wu Ming wiped the non-existent cold sweat. Gilgamesh looked at his hand that was pulled by Wu Ming, and then looked at Wu Ming in a good mood. This king forgives your rudeness. Then, as if he thought of something, Gilgamesh looked at Wu Ming slyly. So, Hyenryong, what do you think of this king's outfit? Gilgamesh said as he moved closer to Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at Gilgamesh's current outfit. The upper body was a white shirt with a black woman's jacket, but it still could not hide the queen's towering breasts. The lower body was a short skirt, black silk stockings, and a pair of high boots, which showed off the queen's slender legs. Long golden hair without any impurities was casually spread out and draped over her back. Her beautiful face was breathtaking, and her red pupils, similar to Wu Ming's, exuded a lofty arrogance. She had the proper queen style. However, aren't you wearing the same type of clothes as me? Wu Ming was slightly puzzled. The two of them were dressed like a couple, and with their red pupils, if it were not for their different hair colors, they would be siblings or siblings. What's wrong with that? You're my teacher. There's nothing wrong with wearing the same clothes as my teacher. Gilgamesh frowned slightly, and a trace of displeasure appeared on his peerless face. That's not a big deal, but the problem is that it's even more eye-catching now. Wu-Ming said helplessly, and pointed at the crowd around them. Gilgamesh looked around, and realized that the people who were busy with their own things had all stopped what they were doing, and were staring blankly at Wu-Ming and Gilgamesh. To be precise, they were looking at Gilgamesh alone. This group of mongrel cultivators trash. In an instant, golden ripples appeared, and countless relics appeared. Wait a minute. Wu-Ming's panicked voice resounded through the sky. Chapter 326. In the amusement park, Gilgamesh walked while licking his ice cream, while Wu-Ming followed Gilgamesh with a tired face. At the entrance of the amusement park, Wu-Ming stopped Gilgamesh's noble phantasm, and used a simple hypnosis magic to hypnotize everyone at the scene and erase their memories. Then Wu-Ming cast a simple magic to reduce his presence on Gilgamesh, and quickly ran away with Nyang Shanshan. Although Wu-Ming, as Jack the Ripper, shouldn't be able to use magic due to his class, but he couldn't stop Wu-Ming, the cheater. The servant's body was Wu-Ming's avatar in the Great Source. All the noble phantasm was on the main body, and the noble phantasm on the servant's body was only the avatar of Wu-Ming's noble phantasm. The assassin class was because the Great Holy Grail captured Wu-Ming's adaptability to that class, so it recreated Jack the Ripper's noble phantasm. But because of Wu-Ming's cheating, the power of Source, Wu-Ming's Jack the Ripper was not pure Jack the Ripper, but a new version of Jack the Ripper that was mixed with some other things. That was why Wu-Ming's assassin class had some attributes, skills, and noble phantasm that didn't belong to Jack the Ripper. However, cheating on a large scale was not advisable. Even if it was Wu-Ming, he couldn't violate the rules of the servant class too much. Therefore, Wu-Ming cheated a little, so that Jack the Ripper, who originally couldn't use magic, could use some small magic. Needless to say, the magic of dispel, suggestion, and reducing one's presence was really useful. After that, Wu-Ming bought an ice cream for Jusama to comfort Jusama's dignity. Gilgamesh, who was walking in front, looked at Wu-Ming, who was quite tired, thought for a moment, and threw the ice cream in his hand behind him. Naturally, Wu-Ming was able to react in time, and caught it in one go. Gil, what are you doing? Wu-Ming looked at the ice cream somewhat puzzled. This king has decided to reward you properly. I'll leave the leftover ice cream to you. Gilgamesh swung his elegant blonde hair, and said in a tone that brooked no refusal. Huh? Are you kidding me? Wu-Ming looked at the half-melted ice cream helplessly. What, you're not satisfied? Gilgamesh turned around and stared at Wu-Ming with her beautiful red eyes. Wu-Ming's eyes revealed the meaning of, if you say no, you're done for. How could that be? Wu-Ming scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Then is there anything for this king to play? Gilgamesh snorted, turned her head, and scanned the entire amusement park. Wu-Ming thought for a moment, then proposed. Since you, Gil, haven't played before, then let us all experience it. Well, let this king see what's so attractive about these boring devices. With that said, Gilgamesh took Wu-Ming's hand and walked towards a certain project. The sign in front of them had the words roller coaster written on it. Wait a minute, don't pull me. Shut up, this is your punishment for pulling this king's hand just now. Yes, your majesty. On the roller coaster that had already started, Wu-Ming enjoyed the cool breeze brought by the roller coaster, and couldn't help but think of Mayu and the others. He still remembered when Wu-Ming brought Mayu, Ilya, and Little Black to the amusement park to play. Ilya and Mayu were instigated by Little Black and were half forced to play on the roller coaster. As a result, when the roller coaster started, Ilya was so scared that she cried and screamed. Mayu was fine, but her face was also pale. In the end, during the roller coaster ride, Ilya and Mayu gradually got used to it, scaring Little Black quite a bit. Looking at Wu-Ming's smiling face, Gilgamesh, who was sitting with Wu-Ming, frowned but didn't say anything. After that, Wu-Ming and Gilgamesh tried the various projects in the amusement park one by one. In the blink of an eye, it was already afternoon, and the amusement park was closed. Because the two of them came at noon, there wasn't enough time. At the entrance of the closed amusement park, Wu-Ming looked happy as if he was reminiscing about the past. Gilgamesh, on the other hand, looked bored. Those things are only suitable for civilians to play. Like the roller coaster. That speed can't even compare to Vimana. I really don't know what's there to be happy about. Hearing Gilgamesh's complaint, Wuming, who was walking side by side with Gilgamesh, looked at Gilgamesh. Well, Gil is the hero king. It's normal for him to be bored by these projects. To be honest, compared to the exciting facilities in the amusement park, combat can stimulate Gilgamesh's desire more. This is a fact. Gilgamesh, who has fully adapted to combat and surprise attacks, can't feel excited by the amusement park's projects. Although that's true, but Gil was also scared in the haunted house before. Wuming smiled mischievously. Because he saw that Gilgamesh didn't care much about the projects, Wuming used the opportunity to enter the haunted house to personally scare Gilgamesh. It can only be said that Gilgamesh still has the weakness of a young girl. Although Gilgamesh only frowned at the time, but from the release of the Gate of Babylon, it can be seen that Gilgamesh was really scared at that time. Cheap joke, this king is particularly annoying, Gilgamesh said proudly. Well, experiencing all kinds of emotions, this is what a king needs to do. Didn't I teach you? Wuming smiled, then pulled Gilgamesh's hand. Let's go home and prepare an unprecedented feast for our long-awaited disciple. Humph. For you to hold this king's hand without permission. This king will not care this time. But if this dinner tonight is not to this king's liking, then you are finished, Hian Riyong. Yes, I know, let's go, my king. The setting sun shone on the man and woman. The two people's shadows were getting longer and longer, farther and farther. At night, Wuming turned into a night walker and shuttled through the streets. Soon, Wuming stopped at the house on the side of the street. Because Wuming felt a battle intent. That's right, that's the battle intent of a servant. Suddenly, on the top of the building where Wuming was, on the street lamp beside the house, golden particles appeared, and Gilgamesh, who had recovered his golden armor, appeared. It's just a hyena's howl. Why, do you want to go? Gilgamesh said rather disdainfully. It's not too much to go and have a look. The last saber swordsman is probably here. This battle intent is probably the invitation sent by Saber, swordsman. I'm very interested. Wuming pressed his top hat and said calmly, to be able to see a good show, this king doesn't mind being a spectator for once. With that said, Gilgamesh turned into golden particles and disappeared in spirit form. Wuming activated the aura barrier and quickly went to the place where the battle intent originated, Winterwood Beach. Chapter 327. Wuming activated his aura block and hid near the beach, while Gilgamesh hid behind a street lamp in his spiritual form. Wuming looked at the center of the beach. There was a blonde woman in black armor with a black mask on her face and a black holy sword in her hand. There was no doubt that this was Saber, swordsman, but it was still someone Wuming was familiar with. Artoria. Wuming frowned. Although Saber did not match Artoria's attribute dark, but whether it was the dark holy sword in her hand or the familiar face under the mask, it all proved that she was indeed the Artoria he knew. It can't be wrong. That is Artoria. After carefully examining the dark holy sword in her hand, Wuming confirmed. But how did Artoria become like that? Wuming felt a little sad. Artoria was Wuming's first disciple, and Wuming liked this little girl, especially compared to the current Gil. However, the Artoria who appeared in front of Wuming at this moment was exuding a strong dark aura, and Wuming did not find anyone else around Artoria. Wuming suspected that Artoria's dark was caused by the destruction of her country. Wuming had checked, and with the British silver dragon, which was the historical record of Wuming's Britain, Artoria's country was destroyed in the end. With Wuming in Britain, the people lived and worked in peace. However, because of Wuming's disappearance, although Artoria did not send out knights to search for the Holy Grail like crazy, she still sent out a lot of knights. The knights who cared about Wuming were also very willing to search for the Holy Grail. However, due to Wuming's departure, Merlin's being trapped in Avalon, he deserved it, and Artoria's lack of power, the ambitious dukes began to target Artoria. Because of Guinevere's longing for Wuming, Morgan and the nobles used this as a fuse to put Guinevere on trial. After all, that era did not allow someone like Guinevere to exist. With the nobles as the leader and the church as support, the trial for Guinevere was carried out. Although the Knight of the Lake, Lancelot, forced the princess to escape, Guinevere, who was condemned, came back and was willing to be punished. Artoria was exhausted and could not go against the era and the rumors of the people, so she had no choice but to burn Guinevere at the stake. The historical records were not very detailed. Lancelot robbed the execution ground and fought with the few remaining knights. Although he managed to escape, he was severely injured. The other knights suffered the same fate and suffered heavy casualties. The knight's faith, the departure of the British Silver Dragon, the disappearance of the Archmage Merlin, Artoria's inaction, Morgan's secret instigation, Guinevere's incident, the Knights of the Round Table killing each other, and the disappointment in the king. All of these led to the destruction of Britain. Artoria's expedition to Rome led to the rebellion of the Knight Mordred, and the conspiracy of the nobles led by Morgan led to the Battle of Camlan. Originally, Silent Wonder thought that Artoria had turned into a dark form because of this, but it turned out that this was not the case. The thick darkness that clung to Artoria's body was like the evil of this world in the Eastwood Holy Grail. That's right. Wooming had previously investigated the interior of the Holy Grail in Winterwood City. The magic in the Holy Grail had all turned into the evil of this world, and its form was some black mud. Artoria's body was full of the evil of this world, as if she had been soaking in it for a long time. What the hell is going on? Does it have something to do with the Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City? After all, Wooming was an assassin without magic, so Wooming did not set up any detection spell in the Great Holy Grail in Winterwood City. However, Wooming had been checking the Great Holy Grail from time to time for the past 2 days. After all, the evil of this world in the Great Holy Grail was also a threat to Winterwood City. If it was released, it would be troublesome. Wooming became serious when he saw Artoria's dark form. It seems that I have to check the Great Holy Grail later, Wooming thought. At this time Artoria, who was standing on the beach, opened her mouth. "You're here, you rascals. Since you're here, don't hide. You'll lose the chance to fight me. I, the Night King Artoria Pendragon, disdain to be associated with you." Sure enough, it's Yulia. Wooming was completely sure when he heard Artoria's voice. Artoria said something that was unclear, but Wooming knew one thing. That was, Artoria was trying to anger the servants who had come to the beach. In Wooming's perception, including Artoria and Wooming himself, there were a total of 7 servants here. That was why Artoria was provoking them. It seems that Artoria wants to kill everyone in one go. She's quite arrogant, just like Gil. Wooming smiled and looked at Artoria, who was standing in the center of the stage. So, who will show up for King Arthur's provocation? Wooming waited with interest. So that's how it is, the famous King Arthur? Then, I can't lose my reputation. Accompanied by a deep voice, a brown figure appeared. The clothes of the West Asian style looked particularly cool. A pair of decorative horns were worn on his head. His strong facial features and strong physique showed that this person was strong. "I'm also a king. This time, I'm here as a rider. Please advise me, spare." The muscular rider was quite polite. He was not arrogant like the other kings. "Are you the only one, rider? Are the others just cowards?" Artoria shouted loudly to provoke the other servants who were hiding. And it seemed that Artoria's provocation worked. Humph. In just one night, there were 2 more mongrel cultivators, scumbags, proclaiming themselves kings. You really don't put this king in your eyes. Gilgamesh removed his spiritual form and showed his figure, standing on the street lamp and despising Artoria and Ryder. I can't continue to hide. A rather frivolous voice came, blue particles condensed, and Cuculin appeared wearing a sage robe. "Yo, I'm Castor, here at Saber's call." Looking at Cuculin's sloppy appearance, Wooming helplessly touched his forehead. I knew it would be these 2 who would come out. After all, Gilgamesh's dignity did not allow others to provoke him again and again. Plus, the 2 kings provoked Gilgamesh. The only king, Gilgamesh, would naturally show up. And Cuculin did not show up in the first place. Wooming guessed that it had something to do with his master. Of course, as a caster, his mind calmed down a little. It's quite interesting. Let's not talk about Assassin and Berserker. Lancer also doesn't show up? Anyway, there are 3 knights. Artoria said without arrogance. Thank you. Chapter 328. Thank you for your respect. A relaxed, lowly voice was heard. A young girl wearing a cloak and holding a scythe in her hand came out of spiritual form and appeared in front of everyone. The large cloak covered most of the girl's delicate body. Her long purple hair was braided behind her head, and the front part of her long hair casually hung down from the cloak. Although the cloak covered most of the girl's body, one could still vaguely see the girl's petite body. It was not an exaggeration to say that she was a young girl. Oh, Lancer, it's a little girl. Are you interested in a cup of tea? It could only be said that Cuchulain was really good at flirting with women. After all, Cuchulain was still Cuchulain. Whether it was a Lancer or a caster, he would not change. Please allow me to refuse, pervert. Lancer refused without hesitation. She made a clear voice like a newborn baby. Very good, except for Berserker and Assassin. Is everyone here? Artoria nodded with satisfaction and put her hands on the invisible holy sword in front of her. Well then, let us decide the victor tonight, heroes. After that, Artoria suddenly released her magical power. The surging magical power overturned the sand on the beach. It looked quite domineering. You really dare to say that, Saber? Cuchulain said, not to be outdone. But it's not a bad idea. Ryder crossed her arms in front of her chest and said rather sullenly, Humph. Gilgamesh did not say anything. He just looked down with a look of amusement. Lancer, on the other hand, was silent. Apparently, she agreed with Spare's proposal. That's right, it saves us a lot of trouble. Are you here, Assassin? Come out and fight with me. I know you can't be restrained by a mere assassin. Cuchulain shouted to the surrounding. The other servants seemed to be interested in the assassin, and were not in a hurry to start a fight. Seriously, this idiot, is it because Sira remembered me? Wuming, who was hiding in the dark, said with a headache. After Wuming left Cuchulain, the intelligence erase skill was indeed activated. Cuchulain did not remember any information about Assassin. However, this did not stop Cuchulain from knowing Wuming's other identity. He was the eldest disciple of the Queen of the Demonic Realm, Cuchulain Sr., the warrior of Connaught, and the Tyrannosaurus of Queen Maeve. Information erasure only targeted information about Assassin, which meant that it targeted information about Jack the Ripper. Because Cuchulain had seen Wuming before, even if he lost any information about Jack the Ripper, he still knew that Assassin was his senior. It was the same as Wuming knowing that Castor was Cuchulain. Both sides only remembered the information of the other side when they were holding guns. For now, both sides only knew who the other side was. Of course, Wuming, who had learned the Loon magic trick, naturally had an advantage over Cuchulain. After that, Wuming also lost interest in continuing to hide. He gently jumped and revealed himself. You are really an idiot, Castor, Wuming complained. Ha ha ha, anyway, I am very satisfied to be able to fight with you. Cuchulain was not angry, but laughed and looked at Wuming full of fighting spirit. So let me introduce myself first. I am Jack the Ripper. This time, I came here as an assassin. Please advise me. Wuming did not pay attention to Cuchulain. Instead, he introduced himself and even exposed his real name. Ryder frowned as if he was not satisfied that a murderer could be on the same stage as them. However, after thinking about it, he was an assassin after all. It could be said that his courage was commendable. Although I admire you directly, it is undoubtedly extremely stupid for you to expose yourself as an assassin, Ryder said dully. As for the others, Lancer did not speak much at the beginning and did not say anything. Gilgamesh was very dissatisfied with Ryder's evaluation of Wuming and looked at Ryder with murderous eyes. As for Artoria, since Wuming appeared, she fell into silence. So, you are the assassin of this Holy Grail war, Artoria said without understanding the meaning, but she had been staring at Wuming with a complicated look. Wuming certainly knew why Artoria was looking at him like that. Without thinking, Artoria also recognized his identity. That saber over there, he's this king's possession, teacher. Put away your invasive gaze. Gilgamesh saw that Artoria's eyes were a little strange when she looked at Wuming, so he said rather grumpily, Is that so? Archer, although I don't know how you came to this conclusion, but he is my possession, knight. Artoria stared at Gilgamesh, and Gilgamesh did not show any weakness and stared back at Artoria. Hey, what's going on? Why do I feel that Saber and Archer are about to fight because of you? Cuchulain said jokingly. Wu Ming's response was only silence. Could this be the legendary Shiraba? Wu Ming thought with some uncertainty, and he even swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It's none of your business, Caster. Do you want to leave as soon as possible? Wu Ming stared at Cuchulain fiercely. However, Cuchulain picked up his staff and spun it twice. I can't wait. Then he looked at Wu Ming full of fighting spirit. As a last resort, 2 daggers suddenly appeared in Wu Ming's vertical hands, which slipped out from Wu Ming's sleeves. Then let me teach you a good lesson. On the other side, Lancer looked at Ryder, who was now vacant. What? Do you want to fight me? Ryder looked at Lancer calmly. And at this moment, rustle, rustle, rustle. A roar that did not seem to be human came. Holding a strange stone weapon that looked like an axe and a knife, the 3-meter-tall little giant roared and jumped into the beach. Rustle, rustle, rustle. He roared again, turned his eyes to Lancer, and rushed up. TSK, the hero who killed the monster and the monster who was killed by the hero were swapped. How ironic, Lancer said softly and rushed up to Berserker. I say, aren't you guys looking down on me a little too much? In an instant, Ryder jumped fiercely and instantly jumped between Berserker and Lancer. Lancer was rational enough to stop, but the irrational Berserker would not do the same. Berserker raised the axe in his hand and slammed it down toward Ryder. Looking at the way his muscles were tied, he must be a servant with high strength or even monster strength attribute skills. Ryder would be injured if he did not die. But clank. A long bone stick like an elephant's trunk stretched out from the ground and blocked Berserker's attack. Rustle! Rustle! Berserker roared angrily because his attack was blocked. As expected of the irrational Berserker. In fact, I'm more suitable for this class, Ryder said lightly. Then, the bone colossus swung its trunk and flung Berserker away in an unbelievable manner. Then, Ryder looked at Lancer, and Lancer raised her scythe vigilantly. Since I can't fight with my old enemy, I'll fight with you guys. Ryder showed a tyrannical smile. His dark face revealed his big white teeth. Looking at the Berserker's smile, Lancer seemed to know why Ryder said that he was suitable for the Berserker class. Chapter 329. The timeline was pushed back to the day. Enosaka House. The manager of Winterwood City, Enosaka Tashiomi, elegantly held a glass of red wine with one hand behind his back. He stood in front of the window and looked into the distance. His eyebrows were full of haze. On the back of his hand that was holding the red wine, 3 scarlet incantations were engraved like mysterious circles. Knock knock. There was a knock on the door. Please come in, Enosaka Tashiomi said. Creak. The door opened with the sound of the door opening. A young priest walked in. If Wu Ming was here, he would definitely recognize him. He was the priest that Wu Ming met at the Chinese restaurant that day. His name was Yen Fengkiri, the son of the old priest that Wu Ming met at the church in Winterwood City. Kiri, what's the matter? Enosaka Tashiomi turned around and looked. The haze between his eyebrows disappeared a lot. Sensei, a suspected servant, was found near Tabaki Amusement Park. Yen Fengkiri said very respectfully. Is it confirmed? Enosaka Tashiomi said seriously. Yes, according to my father's information. It is currently confirmed to be Archer. It is very likely to be a king. Yen Fengkiri said carefully, afraid to make his sensei angry. Sure enough, after Enosaka Tashiomi heard it, the haze between his eyebrows gathered again. It was taken by others. I was too careless. I didn't expect that in addition to the world's first snake fossil, there would be a holy relic that could make the most ancient king appear. Enosaka Tashiomi said rather angrily. However, this is also expected. Calm down. But in an instant, Enosaka Tashiomi calmed down. After all, the Enosaka family's motto was to always be elegant. However, Yen Fengkiri had a feeling that Enosaka Tashiomi was holding on. That's right. Teacher has successfully summoned another king. Yen Feng and Chili flattered from the side. However, Enosaka Tashiomi's expression at the moment was somewhat helpless. In an instant, brown particles appeared. Rider dispelled his spiritual form and stood beside Inosaka Tashiomi. I know you are disappointed to summon me. Rider's dull voice came. No. How could that be, my king? Tashiomi Inaka bowed to Rider. After all, your original target was the ancient king. I'm nothing compared to the ancient king. I can't even compare to my rival, the one from the Macedonian kingdom, Rider said in a low voice, although it seemed like he was belittling himself. Your Majesty. How could Tashiomi Inaka not know? The king in front of him was indeed inferior to the oldest king, and the difference was huge. You don't have to say too much. The only thing I can do is to help you obtain victory in the Holy Grail War, and fulfill my own wish of being able to fight against my old enemy once again. After saying that, Rider's mind went blank as he thought about his formidable enemy. After saying that, Rider's spirit form disappeared. After noticing that Rider had left the room, Yenfengili was slightly puzzled. Teacher, since the king is weak, why did you summon this king? Taking a look at Yenfengqi, Tashimi turned his head and looked into the distance again. Li, Rider's combat power is indeed inferior to the ancient king, but don't underestimate him. Tashiomi Inaka maintained his smile. Li still didn't understand, but he knew that at least Rider wasn't as mediocre as his appearance suggested. The most important thing is that Rider is very obedient. Li suddenly understood. Tashiomi Inaka continued to smile as he looked into the distance. The Holy Grail, a Mito residence. In the house that was completely normal, Lancer sat on the sofa and watched TV. After a while, a soft and gentle voice came. That's Sister Anna, the food is ready. Come and eat together. A black-haired loli with energetic eyes stuck her head out and looked at Lancer, who was sitting on the sofa. The black-haired loli was Sakura Inaka. Because she was adopted by the Amito family, she changed her name to Sakura Madu. Okay, I know, Anna said faintly and sat at the table with Sakura Madu. Although servants didn't need to eat, Lancer still ate like an ordinary person to make his little master more relaxed. Sakura Madu looked at Lancer, who buried his head in eating, then looked at the command seal on the back of her hand and smiled. I'm so happy to be able to meet Sister Anna, Sakura Madu said. However, the young Sakura Madu didn't notice that Lancer, who was sitting opposite Sakura Madu, was shocked, but he quickly returned to normal. After dinner, Sakura Madu took the initiative to clean up the dishes. Then Sister Anna, I'll go to the basement later and clean it up, Sakura Madu said softly. This was because Tongying had been doing this for the past few days. She had been cleaning the rocks. The basement is full of stones. I'll go to the basement to clean up all the stones. Suddenly Lancer said. Oh, is that okay? I want to let Sister Anna rest more. Sister Anna saved me. I can do these things. Sister Anna just needs to participate in the Holy Grail War, Sakura Madu said worriedly, and then looked at Lancer with a smile. Lancer couldn't help but look at Sakura Madu and remembered the scene when he was summoned. Countless insects were rolling over. A skinny and terrifying old man threw Sakura Madu into the insect pile, and a man struggled to summon a servant. However, Lancer found that he was summoned by Sakura Madu, but the summoning magic was provided by that man. Gagaga. Yinya, I didn't think that your death could be useful. Very well, then let Sakura fight in your place. The skinny and terrifying old man made a strange laugh. However, swoosh. With the flash of the sword, Sakura Madu, who was not transformed by the insects, found that the squirming insects stopped moving. Suddenly, Tongying opened her eyes, which had been shut in fright, and looked at the cloaked young lady in front of her. Sister, are you here to save me? Sakura Madu's little face was crying and looked at Lancer blankly. Yes, my name is Anna. Lancer looked at Sakura Madu's crying face and was slightly moved. Gagaga. Unknown servant, I think it's better if you cooperate with me. This way, you and I can get the Holy Grail. The skinny and terrifying old man was obviously a magician, but he was not afraid of the dangerous weapon called servant at all. Lancer glanced at the old man and held Sakura Madu in his arms. Then the sickle in his hand moved, and the old man was instantly dismembered. Gagaga. Unknown servant, you are indeed strong, but this is my magic workshop. Since you don't want to cooperate, then be devoured by my insects. The old man's hoarse and terrifying voice came from all around. In an instant, countless insects ran out of nowhere and rushed to Lancer. Lancer held Sakura Madu in one hand and covered her face, trying not to let Sakura Madu see these insects. Then Lancer directly took off the hood of his cloak, and two golden pupils like a horizontal cuboid looked at these insects. In an instant, countless things that were seen by this pair of eyes were petrified. What? What? Magic eye. And it's a gem? Then, in the old man's surprised voice, all the basement was petrified. Gagaga. Do you think you can kill me like this? Too naive. I won't be polite and will take your pair of demonic eyes. Although everything in the basement was petrified, the old man's voice still echoed in the basement. Is that so? Lancer said faintly. Then, he raised the sickle in his hand and slashed at the man who summoned him before. Ah, what's going on? How did you find me? A fat and disgusting insect fell out of the man's heart. It had to be said that the servant summoned at the cost of his own life was indeed powerful. Lancer easily sensed something hidden in the dead man's heart. Goodbye. Lancer looked at the fat insect with his magic eye. Lancer's calm voice was full of serenity. No. No. How can this be? My trace. The voice stopped abruptly, and the fat insect was petrified. Lancer held Sakura Madu and walked step by step toward the basement door. Bang! When he walked near the statue of the fat insect, the statue broke. Amiya Kiritsugu came alone to a tall building with a panoramic view of the beach. Takeo Kuyutake lurked near the beach with the spiritualized berserker. Picking up the sniper rifle, Amiya Kiritsugu saw Saber. An unknown black armor covered Saber's whole body, and a faint black mist spread from Saber's body. Only Saber's master, Amiya Kiritsugu's wife, Aliceville, was missing. Saber is different from before. Ali disappeared. What's going on? Amiya Kiritsugu said rather irritably. Yes, Saber's master was Aliceville, not Amiya Kiritsugu. The House of Einstein barons wanted to hire the magician killer Amiya Kiritsugu to carry out this Holy Grail war. Because of money, Amiya Kiritsugu accepted the hire and married into the House of Einstein barons. After a few years of getting along, Amiya Kiritsugu and Aliceville had sparks of love, and the two had children. However, when summoning servants a few days ago, Aliceville was suddenly chosen by the Holy Grail, and a stigmata appeared on her hand. Amiya Kiritsugu had been chosen a long time ago, and a stigmata appeared on his hand when he married into the House of Einstein barons. Therefore, the head of the House of Einstein barons, Ahad, let the two of them summon servants together. This could be regarded as cheating. But because of this, the House of Einstein barons had two servants, Saber with the best attributes, and Berserker with the strongest combat power. In this way, Amiya Kiritsugu chose to take Berserker, who was not rational and easy to control, to come to Winterwood in Japan in advance and set up an ambush in advance, and Aliceville came to Winterwood with Saber later. However, according to Kuyumamiya's report, Saber got off the plane alone, and there was no trace of Aliceville beside her. And Saber also changed from the original noble Night King to the current appearance. Ali, where did you go? Amiya Kiritsugu murmured. In any case, Amiya Kiritsugu only had one goal, to win the Holy Grail War. Looking at the Night King began to provoke the surrounding servants. One after another servants appeared, and even assassin appeared. In that case, Mamiya, let Berserker also participate in the chaos. Amiya Kiritsugu said to the communication device. After all, Amiya Kiritsugu was not a magician who relied on servants. His goal was the master of these servants. Yes. Kuyumamiya's voice came from the other side of the communication device. Because of Amiya Kiritsugu's instructions, Kuyumamiya could also command Berserker. Seeing Berserker break into the 6 servants, Amiya Kiritsugu picked up the sniper rifle. Except for those special servants, the servants could not be far away from the master, and the other masters must be hiding in the surroundings, near the beach. What Amiya Kiritsugu wanted to do now was to use the 7 servants to lure out the master's traces. Amiya Kiritsugu, who knew Berserker's strength, was not worried that Berserker would have an accident. At worst, he could use the command seal. After all, Berserker was not rational, and there was no need to use the command seal to contain Berserker. At the same time, Sakura Madu was now hiding inside a container on the beach. Although she was afraid, Sakura Madu still looked at Lancer in the distance through the gap of the door. "You hide inside, no matter what happens, don't come out." This was Lancer's first words to Sakura Madu, and Sakura Madu remembered it firmly. Ananas. Sakura Madu anxiously held her small hand with the command seal, and said anxiously. Of course, this was for Sakura Madu as a child, but for Kenneth as a magician, it was different. He was very hidden. Kenneth and Sora were in a house not far from the beach, and the owner of the house had been hypnotized by Kenneth. Through the familiar, Kenneth could clearly see the big battlefield of the 7 servants. "Is it really okay to let Castor get involved like this, Kenneth?" Sora naturally also had a familiar, and she could also see the scuffle on the beach. After all, the servants of the other masters have already appeared, and Castor also said that he is suitable for the battlefield. Plus I am the head of the house of Akipalud. Naturally, I can't lose the name of the aristocracy, Kenneth said proudly. "As long as you are happy," Sora said indifferently. Although Castor was indeed handsome, Sora was not the kind of person who would casually fall in love with a dead person. She was a proud noble. At this time, the situation on the battlefield changed. Chapter 331. Wuming and Cuculin fought fiercely, but Wuming was gradually losing ground. "Not bad, you guy," Wuming said provocatively, and then suddenly separated from Castor. "Well, after all, this is also a Lunrune trick. Don't say I cheated, brother." Cuculin waved his flaming staff a few times and looked at Wuming proudly. Yes, using the Lunrune to strengthen his weapon, and then using the Lunrune to increase his dexterity to a speed comparable to Wuming's, Cuculin could be said to be suppressing Wuming. After all, the attributes brought by the assassin rank are still too weak, especially in a frontal battle. Wuming said helplessly as he swung the dagger in his hand. Same here, same here. How nice would it be if I could use a gun right now? Compared to magic, I still prefer using a gun." Cuculin looked at Wuming with a wicked smile. "In that case, don't blame me for cheating, Cuculin." Wuming smiled, and the 2 daggers in his hands disappeared. Then a black ripple opened beside Wuming, and in an instant, Wuming inserted his hand into it. "Black ripple? Is this me?" Wuming had the same teacher, so Cuculin naturally knew him very well. Silence had a portable space made of Lune runes, and almost all of his treasures were stored in this space. This was a story passed down in Ireland. Many people didn't know the details, but Cuculin knew that if he was willing to work hard, the so-called Lune rune space could be created. "Yes, this is the space where my treasures are stored, and I can use the weapons inside." Saying so, a smile appeared on his face, but Cuculin felt that this smile was ridiculing him. Whoosh! Wuming pulled out a long spear from the black ripples. The long spear made swishing sounds in the air. "The spear of the world tree, I knew it." Cuculin secretly smacked his lips, with a "I should have known" look on his face. "Don't say that I cheated. This is the benefit of the undead." That's right, Wuming had taken out the spear of the world tree Yggdrasil. Wuming meant that the undead could create a clone and turn it into a servant, and it would not restrict itself according to the rank. Fizke, wouldn't that make you a lancer with an assassin rank? Cuculin protested. That was right. This was also the reason why Wuming insisted on keeping the Dragonist relic. All of his weapons and items were inside. This is not the case. My ability value is still assassin's ability value. My skills and relics are also assassins. At best, I can only say that I am an assassin with a long spear. Wuming was not wrong. At this moment, Wuming's ability value, skills, and relics were all assassin Jack the Rippers. Well, take this Castor. With Wuming's shout, the white dragon spear swept towards Cuculin. Damn it. Don't underestimate me, this is part of the fun. Cuculin was not angry. Instead, he was delighted. He waved his flaming staff and met the swimming dragon spear. All the soldiers that were about to be hit by Lancer's scythe split themselves along the incision of the scythe, and then instantly reformed. Lancer's scythe went through them. Lancer was shocked by the strange scene, and was attacked by the reorganized soldiers. Bang! Lancer was heavily hit and flew out. Every soldier was the best of the best. Their strength was generally at the strength of a C-class, and some had even reached B-class. Lancer quickly got up and rubbed his stomach. He looked at the soldiers that had surrounded him with a complicated expression. "Then all of you will turn into stone," Lancer said faintly. He then put his hand on his hat, and was about to take off his hood. At this time, countless explosions were heard. Ryder and Lancer both looked at the place where the explosions occurred. Berserker was the only one who was still attacking the skeleton soldiers. Chapter 332. Artoria and Gilgamesh were glaring at each other. Even when the others had started fighting, they were still glaring at each other. "How vile. This king thought you were a clown. I didn't expect you to be a thief. Do you really want to steal this king's possession, teacher, so badly?" Gilgamesh said arrogantly. "I don't know where you got that conclusion from, but he is my possession, knight. This will never change. You, on the other hand, are a king? Don't you dare tell me your real name?" Artoria sneered at Gilgamesh. "Humph. You call yourself king in front of this king. You want to steal this king's possession in front of him. You don't know this king's name in front of this king. You don't deserve to live anymore, Saber." Gilgamesh waved his hand, and several golden ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh. A few relics extended and attacked Artoria. However, bam, 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 bam. Artoria swung the blackened Excalibur and deflected the treasures that were flying toward her. "Are they all relics? No wonder you dare to talk nonsense here." Artoria looked at the weapons that were deflected to the side and said in shock. "Now you know how powerful this king is. However, this won't change your death. Saber, disappear under my attack." Gilgamesh waved his hand again. This time, dozens of golden ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh. Dozens of relics were flying toward Artoria. "How ridiculous, archer. Do you think you can defeat me with just this?" Artoria raised her holy sword, and countless magic power gathered on the sword. It looked like she was going to release a relic, but Gilgamesh didn't think so. In the blink of an eye, a huge black magic sword was formed. Artoria raised the black magic sword and swung it lightly. The treasures that were flying towards Artoria were all knocked away. "You condensed your noble relic on the sword and didn't use it? Well done, Saber. It would be too boring if you just left like that." Gilgamesh could tell the truth about the Mana Greatsword at a glance. When Wu Ming used his sword, he liked to condense his relic on his sword and not release it. He used it as a giant sword. Well, Artoria learned it from Wu Ming. However, Gilgamesh knew that it was Wu Ming's trick. Therefore, he was even more annoyed when Artoria said that she was his possession. Didn't that prove that they were related? Artoria, on the other hand, did not respond to Gilgamesh's compliment. "If that's all you've got, I advise you to return to the Valhalla as soon as possible." In the face of Artoria's ridicule, Gilgamesh was already annoyed by the relationship between Wu Ming and Artoria. Like a fuse, Gilgamesh was furious again. "Very well, thief, you've completely angered me." Gilgamesh waved his hands, and his huge chest swayed, which made Artoria a little annoyed. In an instant, countless golden ripples appeared behind Gilgamesh. If one really wanted to count, there were at least hundreds of them. "Go to hell, mongrel." Hundreds of relics that were grade B and above bombarded Artoria's place. As the name implied, the beach of Winterwood City was destroyed. The bombardment also affected the other servants. Wu Ming, Cuculin, Ryder, and Lancer all stopped what they were doing and looked over. These are all treasures. As a king, Ryder could naturally recognize the objects that were being bombarded indiscriminately. Lancer did not speak, but took the opportunity to jump back nimbly, widening the distance between him and Ryder, and then left directly. If the 7 servants really fought, Sakura Madu might be affected. Lancer thought so and decided to retreat first. Ryder did not want to stop Lancer from leaving. He just glanced at Sakura Madu's place and no longer paid attention to it. He who had summoned countless soldiers had already found Sakura Madu's position. However, due to his dignity as a king, Ryder did not attack Sakura Madu. "My king, retreat first. There's no need to show your cards here." Toshiomi Inosaka's voice came into Ryder's ears. "Yes, I know." Then the soldiers and the giant elephant beside Ryder sank into the ground and disappeared. Ryder, on the other hand, turned into a spirit and left. On the other side, "Let Berserker retreat," Amiya Kiritsugu said to Kuyumemi on the other side of the communicator. "Yes, Kiritsugu." Later, Berserker, who was preparing to attack Gilgamesh because he could not find the target, stopped and jumped away from the beach. On the other side of Wuming, "Caster, it's time to retreat." Kenneth's voice came. Yes, I'll go now, master," Cuculin said rather unhappily. "That's not like you." Wuming looked at Cuculin. "I can't help it. I'm a caster now. Compared to fighting, I want to guide my master to the right path." Cuculin smiled. After becoming a caster, Cuculin's fighting heart also calmed down. If he did not meet Wuming, he was afraid that Cuculin would really fight as a caster. "But listening to your voice, your master is not the kind of guy who can be guided by you." Wuming didn't attack, but put the gun in his hand into the black ripples. "Well, you're right, but since master asked me to leave, then that's it. Next time, let's fight to the death." After saying that, Cuculin turned into a spirit and left. The reason why Wuming didn't fight with Cuculin was not that he didn't want to continue to fight with Cuculin, nor was it that the gunman's mind was in a mess. It was because Artoria and Gilgamesh were both disciples that Wuming cared about. Wuming wouldn't allow them to kill each other. Thinking so, Wuming went to the place where the explosion had already ended and produced countless smoke and dust. At this moment, Artoria, who was in the center of the explosion, was wrapped in a large amount of black magic fog, as if she was a servant incarnate. Enough magic turned into a magic fog to offset Gilgamesh's noble phantasms. Then, Artoria waved the Excalibur, and a huge magic impact dispersed the smoke and dust caused by the explosion. "You're quite capable, Saber. You formed a magic defense to offset the explosion caused by my noble phantasms." Although Gilgamesh said so, he was already wary of Artoria. How much magic did she have to be able to defend against the explosion of so many noble phantasms? Anyway, Gilgamesh knew that it was impossible for him to do it. The magic required was too great, unless he had the Holy Grail. "Since your attack is over, it's my turn," Artoria said, raising the Excalibur in her hand, and more magic gathered on the holy sword than before. "Is this guy's magic infinite?" Gilgamesh frowned. Then the golden ripples behind him opened. However, this time, what appeared in the golden ripples was no longer a weapon, but a defensive gear. At this time, two chains suddenly appeared behind Gilgamesh and Artoria, entangling them. "Okay, enough is enough." Wuming's voice came. Chapter 333. A black ripple appeared behind Artoria and Gilgamesh, and the chains came out from it. On the other side, Wuming grabbed two chains with one hand, and the chains went into the black ripple. It was the fake Enkidu from Wuming's Dragonist. Wuming, who appeared as an assassin, did not bring Enkidu with him. Although the fake Enkidu was not as good as the real Enkidu, it could still play a certain role. Artoria put away the sacred sword, and Gilgamesh put away the gate of Babylon, which was the best proof. Tisk, Gilgamesh looked at the chains that were tightly wrapped around him and said in a displeased tone. Of course, she could tell that this was her friend's avatar, and it was fake. Gilgamesh hated fake avatars the most. Artoria, on the other hand, did not say anything. This fake chain was made with the original Enkidu, so it only kept its special attack mode against divinity, which was why Gilgamesh was wrapped around by the chain. Artoria, on the other hand, had the red dragon blood in her veins. The chain was nothing more than a sturdy chain. Wuming walked between the two and looked at them. "Sit down and talk. After all, both of you are my disciples." As soon as Wuming said that, Artoria and Gilgamesh were shocked and looked at each other in disbelief. Wuming, who had almost guessed the result, could only smile awkwardly. The next day, in the small mansion that Wuming bought, Gilgamesh was sitting on his personal chair, looking angry, while Wuming was reading the newspaper in a relaxed manner. A natural gas explosion near the beach in Winterwood City. Why is it always a natural gas explosion? Wuming laughed. At the same time, Wuming looked at Gilgamesh. Since Gilgamesh came back yesterday, Gilgamesh had been throwing a tantrum. Well, a girl throwing a tantrum. If the male version of Gilgamesh was here, Wuming would have slapped him a long time ago. Therefore, girls needed to be coaxed, even if they were his disciples. Is Gilgamesh still angry? Wuming asked softly. Gilgamesh did not say anything. He crossed his arms and closed his eyes. But Wuming could understand. First, he hid the fact that Artoria was Wuming's disciple, deceit. Then he used Gilgamesh's friend against Gilgamesh, insult, and even defended Artoria. From Gilgamesh's point of view, all kinds of signs caused Gilgamesh to be angry, which was understandable. I didn't mean to hide it deliberately. After all, I have experienced too many things. If you told me everything, I would be very busy. As Gilgamesh's teacher, Wuming could naturally see what Gilgamesh was upset about. Then Wuming continued. And the reason why you used Enkidu was because you were too disobedient. Wuming suddenly became strict. Gilgamesh was slightly moved, but he still kept silent. Only his eyes opened. Do you remember our purpose? It's not the Holy Grail War, but to investigate the source of the black mud. It's not wrong for you to blindly go to war with the servants, but there must be a limit to everything. You are easily angered. Wuming gently taught Gilgamesh, as if they had returned to the past. As for letting Artoria go, that's because Artoria must be related to our target this time. You know, we should cast a long line to catch a big fish. Wuming advised earnestly, hoping that Gilgamesh could accept it. Humph. Even so, it can't make this king calm down. Although Gilgamesh said that, Wuming, who knew her well, knew that her anger had mostly dissipated. A Uruk Hyenryong feast. Wuming said the name of a set of dishes. Because Wuming was a good cook in Uruk, the set of dishes was once famous in Uruk and even in Babylonia. Therefore, almost everyone who tasted it said that if they could eat it again, they would dare to go to hell, which was enough to show Wuming's superb cooking. Gilgamesh swallowed, thought for a moment and said, Deal. Wuming showed a victorious smile. Yuanzhong Mountain. Wuming came here, and was ready to check the Great Holy Grail again. Is there another source of the black mud? Walking on the way to the Great Holy Grail, Wuming thought. After all, the black mud inside the Great Holy Grail was the evil of this world. And as long as there were humans, there was still a source of evil. Then the evil of this world would not go extinct. It could be said that as long as humans existed, the evil of this world would not go extinct. But I always have a bad feeling. When he came to the innermost part of the Great Holy Grail, Wuming saw a figure. Artoria. Yes, Wuming saw Artoria. Artoria was wearing black armor. Her hands were on the sword inserted in the ground, as if waiting for something. What's going on? Artoria. Wuming frowned and asked Artoria. However, Artoria did not speak. She just opened her closed eyes and looked at Wuming with her golden eyes full of severity and tyranny. I didn't expect you to find this place, assassin. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the nearby shadow. Hearing this voice, Wuming's heart was filled with a sense of crisis. This feeling, Wuming instantly took out the meteor silver and looked at the shadow with 200% vigilance. It seems that you're not an ordinary servant. I'm afraid that Jack the Ripper isn't your real name. A young man with a green top hat, a green coat, and a gentle smile, who looked less than 30 years old, came out from the shadow. Although he was smiling, Wuming could feel the filth in his body. Wuming did not ask, "Who are you?" or anything like that. It was obvious that he was an enemy that would not rest until one of them was dead. With his A-class agility, Wuming instantly rushed in front of the tall hat man, and Wuming raised his sword and was about to slash down. However, when Wuming's sword was still a little bit away from the tall hat man, Wuming's sword was bounced off. Clang! Wuming looked at Artoria, who used her black holy sword to bounce off his sword, and quickly retreated. He quickly opened up the distance between them. Artoria put down her holy sword and stood in front of the tall hat man to protect him. This made Wu Ming could not help but frown. Although I don't know why you are so hostile to me, but it seems that I also hate you, assassin. The tall hat man continued to smile as if nothing had happened. Let me introduce myself first. I am Rafe Lionel Florence. Nice to meet you, assassin. Chapter 334. Rafe Lionel Florence. Wu Ming murmured the name softly. Florence? The 72 demon gods. Wu Ming pondered carefully. Was it related to Solomon, or was it just a coincidence? To be honest, I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm just here to follow the orders of our king. Rafe spread out his hands, showing that he didn't want to fight. But your goal is to destroy the world, right? As long as you have such a goal, you are destined to be my enemy. Wu Ming raised the meteor silver with one hand and pointed it at Wu Ming. Haha. You're right. I can't wait to kill you, assassin. Rafe laughed and looked at Wu Ming with a twisted face. Go, Saber. Rafe ordered, and Artoria rushed toward Wu Ming. Wu Ming frowned and raised his sword toward Artoria. Wu Ming was wondering why Artoria became like this, but it seemed that it was because of this guy named Rafe. Bang. 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 Wu Ming was knocked away by Artoria's attack. Artoria was a saber, and her attributes were much higher than Wu Ming's assassin. It could be said that Wu Ming had never felt so weak before. Artoria didn't chase after Wu Ming after knocking him away. Wu Ming steadied himself and didn't rush to fight Artoria. Instead, he looked at Rafe, who was behind Artoria. It seems that you are Saber's master. I'm afraid that her original master has already been killed by you. Rafe laughed when he heard Wu Ming's words. As expected of you. I knew it. You can't be an ordinary person if you make me feel like I have to kill you. Rafe covered his face with one hand, and his voice came from under his palm. Then Lev removed his hand from his face and looked at Wu Ming with his twisted eyes. You're right. I've already taken back Saber's master. Recycling? Wu Ming was a little puzzled, but he did not show it on his face. Lev did not know what Wu Ming was thinking, nor did he want to know. Instead, he pointed at Artoria. Instantly, Artoria's heart began to glow. A cup could be vaguely seen in her heart. That is, the Holy Grail. Wu Ming was shocked. There was indeed the Holy Grail in Artoria's heart. Wu Ming could tell that the Grail in Artoria's heart was complete, which meant that the Grail in the Winterwood Cavern had been inserted into Artoria's heart by Leviticus. Wu Ming hurriedly asked Kalas to check the Holy Grail in the Yuanzong Mountain Cavern. Without a doubt, the Holy Grail had disappeared. Although he did not know how Lev inserted the Holy Grail into Artoria's heart, there was no doubt that the Holy Grail in Artoria's heart was indeed the Holy Grail. This also explained why Artoria had turned dark. Her heart was filled with the evils of the world, so there was no need to mention her entire being. And no wonder Artoria had almost unlimited magic power. It turned out that the Holy Grail was supporting her. And from Lev's words, it seemed that Artoria's master was the Holy Grail. Wu Ming thought of Mayu, Ilya, and Blackie, which undoubtedly annoyed Wu Ming. Yes, I gave the Holy Grail to Saber as a trade. Saber will listen to me. What a perfect trade. Lev sighed like a bard. Then, Lev began to speak again. It's so sad, assassin. I was just going to stay here for a while, and leave after completing the task given to me by the king. But you came in without permission. Lev looked at Wu Ming fiercely. If that's the case, then you can go to hell, assassin. With that said, magic power gathered in Lev's hand, and the Holy Grail in Artoria's heart began to glow. Don't even think about it. Although Wu Ming did not know what Lev wanted to do, he would not just stand by and watch. However, Saber, release your noble phantasm. Sure enough, Lev was also a smart person. He directly ordered Artoria to release her noble phantasm. Although Wu Ming did not know whether Artoria was forced to obey Lev's order or not, he was sure that Artoria listened to Lev and began to condense her noble phantasm. Excalibur. Artoria raised the holy sword high, and countless magic power flowed from the fantasy breed's heart into the holy sword. The black light expanded greatly, and then Artoria slashed at Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at the black light in front of him, and a sentence popped up in his heart. Does this count as being chopped? Dong! A loud noise came from inside Yuzong Mountain, and a black light broke out from inside Yuzong Mountain. The black light was enough to cause a disturbance in Winterwood City, but now it did not cause any disturbance. In the midst of the ruins, Wu Ming struggled to reach out a hand that was wearing a black sleeve. Crash! As the owner of the hand pushed away the rubble, there was a faint sound. Wu Ming's figure squeezed out of the rubble in a sorry state, and he shook his head. "Oh, it hurts. I almost went back to my roots." Wu Ming sat on the rubble in a sorry state, and he held his head in pain. "Master, if you did not activate the inherent barrier at the critical moment, with your current attributes, I'm afraid you would have returned to your original body," Collis, who was on Wu Ming's head, said. Although Wu Ming's body was quite broken, the top hat had always been clean. Well, after all, who knew that Artoria could release her noble phantasm in an instant? Wu Ming laughed. That was right. Logically speaking, the light cannon noble phantasm needed a short time to charge. And without charging, the power of the light cannon noble phantasm was not enough to be compared with a noble phantasm. As for Artoria's instantaneous noble phantasm, it should be a convenience given to her by the Great Holy Grail. Fortunately, Jack's noble phantasm is useful, or else I would be dead. The moment Artoria released her noble phantasm, Wu Ming activated the inherent barrier, Dark Mist. Although he succeeded in pulling himself into the inherent barrier, he was still sent flying by Artoria. Therefore, even though Wu Ming looked rather wretched, his foundation was not damaged much. After using magic to repair his body, Wu Ming began to pay attention to his surroundings. Looking at the burning streets around him, Wu Ming frowned. I remember that I was sent flying in the direction of Winterwood City, and the burning here does not seem to be caused by me falling. Wu Ming looked at the burning Dongwu City, and felt a sense of uneasiness as he felt the extremely turbid aura. Then, Wu Ming jumped onto a tall building that was almost completely burned. Looking around, the entire Winterwood City had turned into a sea of fire. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.